Molefe, who was accused of raping and sexually assaulting learners at the A.B Xuma primary school in Soweto, has been acquitted on all counts. Molefe faced 11 counts of sexual assault and 3 of rape. For more on the story, we crossed our reporter Hitekani Magwedze, who is at court. Good afternoon, Hitekani. What was the reason for that acquittal?
Well, good afternoon and good afternoon to our viewers. Well, the judge talked about a comedy of errors. In his words, he said there was a comedy of errors between the teachers who initially investigated or did a preliminary investigation into what happened at the school, calling the kids all in one class and asking them if they were in fact assaulted by the accused. He said that was not supposed to have happened because you found that some learners would influence each other for one or other reason to lie. In fact, there was one learner who did admit that her friend told her to lie and say she was touched by the 58-year-old sexually. On top of that, he talked about what happened at the teddy bear clinic when some of the learners were brought into questioning, and so that they can relay their statements. He says that on the initial statements, it was clear that the learners may have said, for example, that they were not touched sexually, but when pressed and forced to say otherwise, it was found that the prosecutor may have crossed the line and may have not dealt with children the way you're supposed to when finding or getting evidence from them. And he says that what happened at Teddy Bear Clinic was not supposed to happen. The children were supposed to be treated differently. But he also says that the prosecutor in this case erred quite a lot. He was not satisfied in the way that the prosecutor dealt with this case. In fact, in his words, he said that before I step away from this embarrassing moment, let me give the code of conduct of prosecutors, and he went through the codes of conduct which included integrity, objectivity, and not pressing or forcing evidence to ensure that they close the case. He said that they're supposed to be objective and assist the court to find justice. So in a nutshell, he found that these stages of this investigation towards the judgment was not dealt with correctly. And as I said, he found that there was a comedy of errors. But also, in addition to that, the witnesses that gave the testimony here, which were children, he did say that he understands that these are children and that there may be inconsistencies here and there, but he found that on all counts, he says the children were not credible, and there were material inconsistencies in the evidence. Of course, we know that there was no medical evidence to support the statements of the children. But on top of that, we also know that the initial statements that they gave to police officers were not consistent with what they gave at the witness stand.
Hitekani, what was the reaction in court to that acquittal, and do we know if the decision will be appealed?
Well, first and foremost, we don't know if the decision will be appealed, but I am joined by a spokesperson for the parents who came here. She's a ward councillor in the area in Orlando, and she's going to speak on behalf of the parents. Ma, thank you for joining us. What is the reaction of the parents to the acquittal?
The parents are very devastated by the decision that was taken by the court today. And remember, they've been devastated from the beginning of this case, because even during the case, there were a lot of discrepancies that were done, especially by the police officer. I must indicate that the police officers were very negligent in terms of handling this case. As a result, we even raised this with the South African Police Service to say there are so many discrepancies from the word go. So as it is now, to a certain extent, we are not surprised by the verdict, because it was because of the negligence of the police.
What is the next step? I mean, I understand that the parents were trusting that the state would make sure that justice is had according to them, to have the accused stay in prison. What is the next step from the parents now?
The next step from the parents is that they want to appeal the judgment, because they feel that the court concentrated on the mistakes that were done in the process, but it never concentrated on whether the actual crime was committed or not. And remember, this case was very overwhelming for everybody, for the prosecution, for the police. It was overwhelming. That is why there were mistakes. And blaming the educators would be unfair. It's very unfair of the court to blame the educators, because educators are professionals in educating, and that's it. But if there were mistakes that were done, those mistakes are justified, because they are not trained social workers, so they might not have known what would be the correct thing in terms of dealing with the matter.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Ma.
Thank you so much, sir.
Well, there it is. The parents would like to appeal this case, but we know that the court can only deal with the evidence that has been brought forward, and because of the errors that the judge says preceded what was going on, it's clear that the court did not have sufficient evidence to work with in terms of coming down to a more justified, according to the parents, result and decision.
Hitekani Magwedze giving us an update on the case at A.B Xuma. We know the man accused of rape has been acquitted on all counts, and we'll follow that story and keep you updated. For now, it's time to take a break. We'll have more business news for you after that. Do stay with us.